I was talking to a friend of mine last week about lad eaters, and she told me a story which was so good. She said this: my partner and I went out for a romantic dinner at a very fancy restaurant, a restaurant we've been wanting to go to for quite a while. We sat quite close down to another couple next to us, maybe less than a metre away from us. About 20 minutes after we arrived, so did their entrees. She got a lovely looking ravioli dish and he got 12 fresh oysters for himself. Red flag number one, I think, on that date.
Oh, yeah.
My first thought was...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she said, my first thought was, geez, he's overdone it a bit there. Oysters are an aphrodisiac, so maybe he thought he was getting some later.
Big time. 12 times, presumably.
12. This is where it gets bizarre from her point of view. After he loosened the oyster in the shell, have you ever eaten oysters? When you get the oyster, you got to kind of loosen them a little bit.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, yep.
He loosened the oyster with a knife by running a knife underneath it, and the worst sound that I've ever heard happened straight after this. The biggest ick that I have ever witnessed. Instead of lifting the oyster up to his mouth and tipping it back into his mouth like a normal human being, he lifted the oyster halfway up and then moved his mouth halfway down to meet it, hovering above the oyster. And then the sound happened. He slurped the oyster up like a Dyson sucking jelly. He did
Such vivid imagery.
Oh my god. He did this 11 more times. Needless to say, my appetite... My appetite vanished very quickly, and my boyfriend and I have never been back to this restaurant, and I now have a phobia of oysters. Oh my god.